Welcome, everyone. Happy middle of the summer. It's about to get a whole lot busier, though some of you are already very busy, I know, depending on offices. And some will get very busy soon in as short as a couple weeks when the students arrive on campus. So we've got a good agenda for you today. I'm just going to share a couple things that are happening, just some highlights, but not spend too much time on it. And then our main event for today is to hear from the Graduate Student Council. And they've just been a great partner for not just me, but many people within our offices in moving initiatives forward for the graduate students. And then we'll just have question and answers, as usual, okay? So a few recent and notable things that have happened or are happening. I'm just very appreciative for the response of several parts of our office to some of the pre-completion OPT delays. So these were students who were seeking to work in the United States who are international students, mostly graduate students. And the processing delays in the federal immigration system extended beyond the time when their internships would start, which then put a couple dozen of our students in a sort of financial position, which was not very good. And so we stepped in and helped, and then the ISO did a lot of really great work in doing what they could to accelerate things. But for the fall, we're going to be working with more departments to put some experiential learning options in for students, which will help with that too, we believe. We launched a new diversity, equity, and inclusion module. It went out July 26th as a required part of graduate student orientation. So all new graduate students will be taking that for the first time, which is a great thing. And it will also be a second level of learning, what they call a booster shot for the undergrads who will be doing it in their sophomore year. They have other activities that they do around this already as first-year students. And very quietly, the Office of the Registrar created a really innovative digital diploma, which has grown over the last couple of years from 32% now up to 65% adoption. And I expect that pretty rapidly we'll get to just 100% adoption on that. Minor item, but our offices are being renovated, and we should be back in there in another few weeks. Huge thanks to Jeannie and Bill for doing all that in a seamless way, and to the people who have housed us in their offices as temporary residents for the last couple months. And I think you're aware of this, but we had our budget cycle, which takes a full year really to come through. We do a lot of the work in August and September, so we're starting to do it now for FY21. We submit it in November, December. We hear in late January, early February, and then we get the money in July and then can act on it. So it's a pretty long cycle. But we had a very good budget response in a very tight budget year. That included headcount for admissions, for CAPD, and also for the Office of Graduate Education. So we continue on the good work of the people in this room to be able to make the case for the resources that we need. It's not everything we need, but it's more than many other groups have been getting. And then just about all the offices are involved in prioritization exercises as well. I have a lot of work being done with cross-functional teams. I'll just sort of flash these up here. Learning management system team is complete. We have several that are finishing soon, one that Dave Darmafal leads on career explorations. We have student professional development, international students of color, graduate families working group. In progress, we have an effort to grow not purely online, but hybrid online and face-to-face interphase edge that'll take place over this year and next year in terms of further development. Grad advising effort, the data and survey team, a wellness team, and starting soon a first-generation students team. So lots of activity that's spanning across our offices into DSL and well beyond into other parts of MIT. And our three priorities as a headquarters team really remain the same. There's a lot of objectives that we have, but the highest level ones for us as sort of change agents to work on are transforming the first year. Obviously, many people in the organization are engaged in that with us. Helping MIT become a leader in department, lab, and center-based advising and professional development for graduate students. There's a lot of activity there that's been happening in the last 6 months, and expect to have a lot more happening in the next year. And then, of course, just leading and managing the offices of the Vice Chancellor to do an even better job providing services and programs for our students. So what does it look like? A few things that have happened in the last year. Or last 6 months, rather. So on the first year, we had phase 2 of the CUP experiment approved, which was very exciting. We have the development of a wide range of discovery subjects, little bite-sized ways to learn more about different majors and fields, some being taught by people in this organization, in fact. We have an advising pilot for first-year students to move towards a little bit more of a professional advising model where the faculty are mentors, but there's a full-time staff person involved. And we have the first-year learning communities developing pilots, one based on putting much more hands-on and project-based learning into the GIRs, and the other one is really focused on trying to open up a little bit of space in the students' schedules so that they can go and explore anything other than sort of problem sets and sort of grinding away in their first year. So there's some exciting things happening there. On the grad side, I think this will probably be our busiest year ever coming up. I mentioned here already the professional development and advising. We've had a lot of great work with the GSC, in fact, on the financial security side, where we recognized a couple years ago, actually, that just adjusting the average stipend for grad students addresses the cost of living issues for those students who are getting an average stipend, but not for those who are on partial support, half stipend or no stipend. And no matter what we do to make small adjustments for cost of living, it's not really addressing the pain points for students who are on partial support. So it's taken 2 years so far with a lot of data analysis and surveys, but we got a commitment from all the 5 MIT schools to put in place policies and practices to remove that pain point to the extent they can for doctoral students. And now Mary Murphy is in particular working to help move that forward with the schools. But that's, I think, a real win for our offices, for the GSC, and for the grad students at MIT. And then there's a lot of work going on also on the mental health side. And that's because we don't do any training really that's specific for grad students around mental health and wellness. And we do it for undergrads, we do it for faculty. Many of you taken at risk for faculty and have sort of thought about those things. So we're working with EverFi, which is a company to develop some first-level training tools that'll be accessible, and I think we make them required for all grad students at MIT. So a lot of good things happening, and that's just sort of a subset. Within the OVC, I wanted to highlight a few things because they aren't what you might think of inside the OVC. So we've recognized in particular for graduate students that if we're going to work effectively on diversity, equity, and inclusion, we need to do it by partnering with the schools and departments and with Mind, Hand, Heart. So that's been happening. We understand that for many different things, we have to be more effective in partnering with the undergrad and grad administrators, faculty governance, and the assistant deans. And so we've gotten very intentional in the last, I would say, 3 to 6 months in thinking, how can we use some network effects with these people outside of our organization? And then we're also thinking about how we can use improved technology, which is something that Mary Callahan and her office lead in partnership with IS&T. But we've, in particular, been, among many other things, developing a way to better connect and share existing databases of information so that we can be more effective in supporting undergrad and graduate students across MIT. And that's actually one of these things that sounds really easy, but we have 15 or 20 different offices who all have their little window on the world and data, and they're not connected. And so the process of connecting those and doing it in a way where there's transparency and real assurance of following all appropriate protocols with the data, it is a major effort. So a lot of things happening. And I'll leave you with just one thing, which you can credit Michael Rudder for. And this is, of course, is Sang-Bae Kim on the Jimmy Fallon show. And so Michael decided we're going to end this with something fun, which is this, because I'm not fun. And, and so he said, stay nimble and balanced, which I think is really good advice for all of us, because there's a lot happening and a lot continues to happen. But I just want you to pay attention here to Sang-Bae's face, because it's sort of like before it does it, he's just saying, please don't screw up, please don't screw up. And then look at his face like, yes, it really worked. So anyway, a little bit of MIT on TV. I will stop there, and we'll have the opportunity at the end for questions and things. So I think what I'm going to do is transition and just ask Peter to walk through everything that the GSC is doing, besides being great partners with us, because it's really been a good last couple of years. So, Peter.
Thank you so much, Ian. Let me see. I think, ooh, Mac touch bar. Very awkward. Oh, right, I had to click. Sorry, I use a Windows PC and it doesn't quite feel exactly the same. All right, awesome. Yeah. Thank you so much, Ian, for the introduction. So my name is Peter. I am the Graduate Student Council President. We also have the rest of the officer team here. So we've got Robin sitting right there. He's our treasurer, Alex, our vice president, and Naveen, our secretary. And yeah, so we're just going to kind of go through. That is the end of the presentation. So I'm going to go all the way back. Funny, the end, last slide seems like the first one. So okay, all right. So the presentation today, I kind of want to focus your attention on a couple of different things. So one is, what is the GSC? That's what I'm going to go through first, give you guys sort of a structure and mission. And then for the rest of the slides, I'll be going over like what the GSC has done these past couple of years. And the way I want you all to think about that is like, how does the GSC support students? And then also, how has the OVC been a great partner and help to what we've been doing? Those specific partnerships will be highlighted in red. I hope I got everything. All right, so let's dive into it. So the GSC itself, so we're all graduate students. We're trying to represent all of the graduate departments and programs here at MIT. And we're dedicated to making sure that the experience of all MIT graduate students is as amazing as possible. That's like the simplest way to put it. So we do that in a lot of different ways. But our structure is right here. And I'm going to go through kind of what all of our committees do, just so you can get a general sense of like, oh yeah, we do all of these things. And then I'll go into detail with my other slides. So what we've got is here's our 4 officers right here. And then we have a bunch of committee chairs. And they all chair all of our committees that do our actual work. Right? So the officers were just there to like be figureheads. We do some specific things, but largely it's not our job to do a lot of this stuff. So we've got our external affairs board right here. So they actually do our external advocacy, so with governments, federal, local, state. And so that's always a lot of fun. That's actually where I started on the GSC before I became president. We also run the Money Charles Pub, so that's what the Money Charles Pub board does. It's pretty simple. Our activities committee right here runs all of our social events. So they do things like ski trip, grad gala, the Taste of series. And then we have our new diversity, equity, inclusion committee. This became a committee actually at the beginning of this fiscal year. So they're obviously working on diversity, equity, inclusion for the graduate student body. We have housing and community affairs, which I guess I probably should have said that last because it covers everything that other committees don't really cover, because it's housing plus community affairs, which is super vague and therefore covers everything that other people don't do. So that includes things like sustainability. They work on, they're starting a new well-being subcommittee, so they're going to be working on that. But they cover a lot of different things, and I don't even remember all of them. So we then have academics, research, and careers, which does our professional development activities. So that's what they do. And then we have orientation, because graduate orientation, unlike undergraduate orientation, is run by students. We are now getting a lot more staff support, which is great, but it was originally almost an exclusively student-run affair. Obviously, I should mention, with the help of our two wonderful staff members, Betsy and Lauren over here, they've always been helping us with everything. They do a lot of stuff. They take care of all of like the background bureaucracy things so that we don't have to think about it. Super helpful. The final thing I'll mention here is that the ASA, so the Association of Student Activities, is actually a joint undergraduate association and GSC committee, and they take care of all the student groups on campus in terms of like recognition, funding, and that kind of thing. And the last thing I think I'll mention is we have funding board here that's under the treasurer, the GSC, and that funding board handles a lot of student group funding for graduate student groups. So we also give out a lot of money to graduate student groups to like run their events. Most of it ends up going toward food, obviously, because it's always nice to have food at events. The final thing is that we have a general council, which is composed of representatives from all of the departments here at MIT, and then also from all our grad dorms. And then obviously all of these people also sit on the general council. So that's like our overall legislative body that has final say on everything officially. Yeah. So by the way, you guys can interrupt me any time for questions, because I don't know how much this is like new information. Yeah, so that's our entire structure and sort of what we do. So let's dive into the specifics of like some of the things that we've done these past couple of years. So obviously, as I said, our activities committee runs a lot of amazing events. So this is just like four of a very, very large array of different things. So I think one of the bigger new things this past year has been we've been doing a lot more paint nights, which has kind of been a big thing that's kind of exploded on campus. I know a lot of other organizations on campus are also trying to do more paint nights, which is really awesome. We also have like a bunch of different summer trips. One of them is whale watching. I think that the one for this year happened like maybe a month ago, I think. We run the Taste Of series, where cultural groups we do like the taste of, a certain country or something, where cultural groups, can show their cultural foods. And this always attracts a ton of people, because obviously it's like free food, which is always nice, with like no strings attached too. It's just the free food. And then we have Grad Gala, which is like our premier party, I guess. This past year was on a boat. I think that's the first time we've done that in a while. The previous 2 years we were at the Museum of Science and then the aquarium. So those were actually very interesting venues for a Grad Gala. We'll see whether we go back again. They're like kind of expensive, and the food costs had to come down. But you make sacrifices. So another thing that as I said, we do is external advocacy. So there's been a lot of very good things happening from our External Affairs Board. If you remember, in 2017, there was this tax bill that was introduced, and as part of it, it included a tax on the tuition waivers for all graduate students, which obviously would have made they would have cost us like an extra $10,000 or something in taxes, which is really not great. So we did a lot of advocacy around that. Both the officer team and our External Affairs Board. We had like an interview with NPR, both the local affiliate and the national NPR. And we also worked a lot with a bunch of graduate student governments across the US through the National Association of Graduate and Professional Students. And they also did a lot of stuff. We had another trip to DC specifically for this that was funded with help from the OVC, actually, come to think of it. But yeah, so and we managed to make sure that wasn't in the final bill that was passed. So that was like a huge effort that year. We also, in terms of sort of state advocacy, we've been doing a visit every semester to the State House, but we also now got a bunch of other Boston area schools involved. So that's a very new thing. Our first sort of joint State House visit was this past spring. So that's really exciting. We also are now getting a lot more involved with the Cambridge City Council. So obviously there's an election this upcoming November, which is also actually a local city election. So we're going to be doing a lot of work there around voter registration and turnout. But these past couple of years, as more young people have been getting involved, I think Cambridge City Council has realized that, like, oh yeah, students are an important voice in the city, and they're trying to increase their interaction with us as well, along with us doing more outreach. One of the big focuses of mine personally has been communications. I think that there's been a lot of issues with where graduate students, like you guys all do a bunch of wonderful things and the graduate students have no idea they're happening. So we've been trying really hard to communicate better with graduate students, make sure they know what's going on, make sure they know the resources that they can access here at MIT. So one thing that we're trying to do is we're trying to pilot some monthly emails called what we're calling resource roundups. So the idea is that every month we pick a topic and then we send an email out saying, here are all the resources that you can find around this specific topic. So the first couple that we did were focused all around professional development, and we're going to try to get a couple more lined up for this upcoming semester, and those will be in active development soon. We're also holding regular communications meetings with all of the administrative offices, so OVC, the Chancellor's office, DSL, just so that we have better coordination of all the communication, both from our end and from, obviously, MIT's end. And that's been really helpful. It's allowed us to sort of time everyone's emails out so that graduate students are getting a consistent message across all channels. Another thing that we're really focusing on as well is improving orientation. So graduate orientation, what we're trying to do now is have less of a giant information dump as soon as students get on campus, and trying to spread that out so that's a bit earlier. What we're doing now is we have bulletins that we're sending out. So similar to the resource roundups, now it's going to be stuff that students need as they're coming to MIT. So we're trying to emphasize more information in students' inboxes, something that they can search for before they even arrive on campus. So they kind of, when they arrive, they kind of already know things that are going on. They kind of understand the lay of the land already. And that way, this year we're focusing a lot more on welcoming students. So we're cutting back on events as well, because the idea is that when students get here, we want them to feel like we have big, like relatively spread out events so that they don't feel super stressed about everything, and it's like a much more welcoming atmosphere. They already have all the information from the emails that they got before they got here, and then when they get here, it's just like these big, nice, welcoming events that they can go to, or they can meet other students, meet current students. So that's sort of the idea that we're having in terms of orientation and how we're changing it. For professional development, there is, as Ian said, a ton of things going on. This is like only a few things that I like asked Richard to help me figure out. So Richard Zhang, if some of you probably have worked with him, he was secretary last year, and now doing our alumni relations stuff with ARC, with our Academics Research and Careers Committee. But so we, as part of Career Fair, well, I guess as part of the Career Fair week, we piloted a GSC, so like a graduate-specific networking event last year. It's going to happen again this year. We got like 200 plus students and 30 plus employers last year. We also hosted a couple of different alumni panels during the Alumni Leadership Conference last year. And we've also, CAPD has been a tremendous help on a lot of things, and we've been supporting them with a lot of, so there's been a lot of interaction there. So working on developing sort of professional development, competency chart, and everything along those lines. And we're also, as Ian mentioned, working to add a professional development component to the graduate curriculum, which should help with the OPT, CPT stuff, because it hopefully would enable international students to take a CPT option as part of their curriculum. Another thing that we're doing is grad housing. So grad housing has gone through, there's been a lot of activity around that this past couple of years. So Volpe was also, I think, 2017. It was a very, very busy fall semester, 2017. So we managed to work with MIT to secure a new commitment for 950 new grad beds by well, committed by 2020, and that was tied into the zoning of the Volpe site. We've also been making a lot of changes to the lottery system that housing uses to decide how graduate students get housing. A lot of this is focused on making the MIT housing system a little more flexible, so students are less like locked into either choosing on-campus or off-campus. They can be a little more flexible and therefore more willing to go for on-campus housing. So some changes that we made, so now you can enter the housing lottery with your roommates. It used to be where you had to like get assigned the same type of room individually before you could then choose to have those people as your roommates. Very bizarre. Now you can say, I want to be roommates with these people. Let's all try to get the same type of housing together. And you either get it as a group or you don't. Much better. We also are more flexible now with sort of who's living in certain types of rooms. So grad couples are being allowed into some of the single dorms where we have very large efficiencies. And also, when we had some unfilled efficiencies in the family dorms, single students were allowed to live in those. So just like MIT's housing system being more flexible and willing to fill the beds with people who weren't originally like allowed into those rooms. It's been really helpful. A couple of changes for this upcoming year. Incoming students are now getting up to 2-year leases. So this is really helpful for master's students, where if you're only here for 2 years, now you can get MIT housing for those 2 years and not worry about housing your entire time here. Very handy. Lease end dates are being changed, so it's now the end of a month instead of the middle of a month. It used to be August 15th, which is really weird because no leases in the private market start August 15th. So it's like you either had to like have this 2-week period where you needed to find random housing before your lease started in September, or you had to pay an extra 2 weeks for 2 different houses. It's like, great. We're also now changing the sort of selection system, so it's now much more like the private market, where you can actually select the specific room instead of just the room type. This is still being tested with certain number of students. They were working out the technical details, but hopefully when that gets rolled out for this upcoming year's selection process, it'll be a lot easier for students to like decide whether to live on or off campus, because if they find an off-campus apartment, they can just choose not to pick a room, and if they can't find a room they like, they can just go to off-campus. It's not a problem. There's also been a lot of work, as Ian mentioned, around financial distress, and also a big focus on families as well, because that's a very big component of financial distress for a lot of students here at MIT. So the stipend recommendation that we make every year to the Dean's Group, traditionally, as Ian has mentioned, has focused on just like cost of living increases and therefore how we change the average stipend. But these past 2 years, we've done a lot more focusing on sort of who's actually, like the tail, the number of people who just aren't receiving as much support as the average student here at MIT. So we managed to secure that commitment that Ian already mentioned from all the schools to work on eliminating distress from 9-month or half stipends and non-resident PhDs. We're also working with the OVC's Graduate Family Support Working Group. As Ian mentioned, it should be wrapping up probably sometime in the fall-ish, in exploring better how we can support grad students with families on campus. So I think some of the things that we've been looking at is, one of the big problems is data collection. We don't really have good data on who those students are and what their pain points are. And also benchmarking against other programs at other schools, figuring out what do they do, what could we copy. That's been helpful. We're also, as I mentioned, doing a lot of work on diversity, equity, and inclusion. We have this new committee that we just formed on it. So what they're trying to do is they're trying to organize all of the departments. So they have department representatives, so they can departments can then share best practices and information about what's going on at the department level. We're also going to hire a graduate community fellow that's focused on data around DEI issues. So there's a lot of departments. Some departments have put out climate surveys or something like that. This is sort of centralizing that data and also helping other departments that then want to implement those surveys to help develop those surveys. And we also have, obviously, the committee has also engaged a lot of the upper administration on the ICEO related things, and also a lot of the questions around the college computing and diversity issues there. Okay, finally, for this year, so that was like a lot of stuff that's happened this past year and is continuing on this year. But I think this year we also have 2 new focuses that are relatively new. So one of them is advising and the advisor-advisee relationship. As Ian mentioned, there's a new overall sort of umbrella group being started by the OVC. And we have a new subcommittee that's forming within our Academics, Research, and Careers Committee that's focused explicitly on this. There's been a lot of efforts from the graduate student body side, department level and also at the School of Engineering. And we're hoping to sort of bring that up to school-wide by having the GSC also focus on it. We also have a new well-being subcommittee within the HCA. And this is also going to try to give IREFs a more permanent home. So the REFS is the Resources for Easing Friction and Stress, which is a sort of peer-to-peer, peer-to-peer support. They're trained on conflict management. But they also happen to see a lot of sort of the issues that students are running into because the students are looking for other students they can talk to about things. But they've been kind of drifting around because the staff member that was originally working on it and like giving the trainings and stuff moved to a different, I think they moved to HR or something from DSL. And the support from the staff side is there, but it's not as strong, I think, as some of the students in IRES would like. So we're trying to give it a better structure within the GSC so we aren't dependent on staff necessarily always being there. Because obviously we know that you guys have your own lives to deal with and don't always have to like focus on graduate students and what we're doing. But this is also going to dovetail a lot with a bunch of things that DSL and Mine Hand Heart are doing. And also, this is going to be greatly impacted by a bunch of other things that we're doing, right? So like advising is also going to be has a huge impact on wellness. So there's like a lot of things that kind of all fit together. So I think that was all of the stuff that I had for like things that we're doing. OVC, as I said, has been a very, very important partner. These are just some of those things that I've already mentioned that we've been working together on. And I'd really like to thank all of you for all the support that you guys have given us these past couple of years. It's been really handy to have. So thanks.
Questions for me or for Peter?
Oh God, see, this is one of my bad data. So I think we have multiple surveys, and I think they all end up being somewhere around like 5%, right?
Between 5 and 12.
Yeah.
Depending on the survey.
Right, so like bad data. We all have guesses, but we aren't totally certain. I mean, it's all purely survey data too, right? So like we don't know whether it's over or underrepresented. It could be lower, it could be higher. We aren't really sure. Yeah.
I'm just kind of curious, what program are you in?
Yeah, so I'm a fourth year going to fifth year PhD, Material Science and Engineering, course 3. Yeah.
That is actually one of the things to highlight about both the GSC and the UA leadership is that, these are our day jobs. For them, sorry. Oh. Now I'm good, right? Thank you. But for them, they're students, they're doing research and things like that, and then the time that they put into this is time beyond that. And at least the interactions I have with them number in the sometimes multiple hours per week. So they really are doing a tremendous sort of service to for all the other students and for MIT thereby by putting in time above and beyond just taking classes and doing research.
It's fun, otherwise I wouldn't do it, right?
The students with kids, are they all like 2-year-old? I know bad data, but is there anything where we could run some activities for grad students with kids that would be a fun social thing for that particular clientele?
I think we already tried to do a few things. You have some, Yeah, you want to do
I've been working with Naomi
Good
Carton.
thing I'm carrying a microphone.
Oh, hi. So I've been working with Naomi Carton in the, she does the educational residential side. She works specifically with families. We tried to recruit within GSE families to do specific events, and the one thing that we kept running into is if you have a family, you're too busy to be doing things outside of running, you know, an event. So we've tried to partner. There will be a family social as part of orientation, and then she does other things specific to families as well. One of the places that we have a difficulty is 65% of our grad student population lives off campus, and that includes some families as well. So this year, we just, like within the last week, started an email list just to collect that data because they have to opt into it. We can't collect it. They're not like a student, so we have to have them, we have to put it out there and hope that they come back to us and reach out. But we do have events, and we're trying to promote them to get more families involved.
But it's also the case that if you have an idea for a fun set of events, you know, I would talk to them and propose it, right? Yeah.
What aspects of the advisor-advisee relationship are you most hoping to change?
So I think, well, different students have different focuses. I think me personally, I personally want to focus more on the sort of tail end of like really bad situations. I figure like we should at least get students out of those. So I think a lot of my focus that I want to do is sort of enabling, well, one of the big things is like, can we enable students to like switch advisors easier? Can we give students better information so that when they choose their initial advisor, they know better what's going on, things like that. But I know there's also a lot of students who are, I mean, there's also a lot of work, you know, focused on sort of training and making sure that advisors understand, you know, the base level of acceptable advising, so that, you know, it never gets that bad, you know. So
Yeah.
there's a lot of things going on.
And one of the other areas that we're hoping that all advisors will get a little bit better at, though some are already very good, is recognizing that the students are here as part of a broader professional development. And it's not just about, you know, writing proposals and doing research, but are there broader experiences or trainings that they can have, or even a discussion about, well, what is their career trajectory and things. And because of the power imbalance between advisors and advisees, not all students feel comfortable being open with their faculty advisor about even what they want to do after they leave MIT. So things like that, I think, are mostly unintentional consequences of our culture. There are a few cases where it's just people who are out to lunch and not doing a good job, but I think it's actually some broader cultural things that we need to work on. But there's a great team now that Lauren is corralling that extends across MIT that's focusing on this.
Is there anyone, I assume no, but like with first-year students, they come in, we are first-year advisors, and we're not just focused on their academics, we're focused on them landing here well. And academic advisors in grad school are more focused on the research and landing in that well. Right there is like, who are there individuals that the students can go to for caring about them as people that doesn't have to go all the way from mental health?
Not that's like institutionalized that I can remember, that I can think of.
Yeah, there are some departments who have some people and roles who do that function, but yeah, it's not been institutionalized.
I know that there's some departments that run a sort of like older graduate students as mentors type thing. I know that like our department of material science tries to do that. Obviously the quality of those programs will vary, and I think a lot of it is like, it's very department based, right? So like if your department does something, another department doesn't necessarily have to do it. So it's sort of, the success of that varies a lot across departments.
Is the area where you can both improve the social aspect of things and get people to be cared about by folks who are veterans here.
Yeah,
And,
that's a
having a
interesting
student
idea.
resource would be a good thing.
Yeah, very interesting idea. I think what ends up happening is usually end up talking about like the sort of things that are similar across schools. Because other than that, then it's like daily life stuff that's never same for anybody. So I think I can't like from the very small sample size, I think it ends up being very similar. But I also like don't really get too much of the other stuff. I think most of us like talk about research and stuff like that with each other. So it's like, oh, complaining about your advisor or something potentially, or stuff like that. Yeah. So I don't think I have. I don't know about you guys, if you guys have any other experiences, but I've pretty much never really heard anything outside of the sort of basic. Harvard food.
From the public school.
Microphone?
School of Public Health. There was a student that met with you from the public school of School of Public Health a few weeks back. They were talking about food insecurity on Harvard.
Oh, yeah. So there's some things. Oh, yeah, I guess I can draw off of what's happened with the National Association of Graduate Professional Students, which is sort of a bigger network where we've heard of other issues. And food insecurity has been something that we have heard a lot. It kind of died back down again. There's certain campuses that are still working on it more actively. I know that we did a decent amount of work on it like 2 years ago, I think, at this point. But I don't think we've done that much more. We have some programs established already that are just kind of happening.
Well, and a lot of the financial and security stuff is focused on that same wedge.
Yeah.
My experience from going to the Ivy Plus grad deans meetings are that the sort of pain points on research institution campuses are very, very similar, much more similar than they are different.
Yeah, there's a lot of common things. I think there might be like one or two small things that are different across campuses, just due to like very specific things that are happening in the local area or something like that. But I don't think
some
there's
people
that much
have
different.
Put a lot of effort into improving in certain areas, and for those we try to figure out how we can copy or do what they do. In other cases, there's a few areas where I think we've made some real strong moves here, but. The issues and the drivers, I think, are pretty common.
Hi, I'm Diana Jones, right now working on Office of Education. Thank you for the presentation. Learned a lot about what you've been doing, but we hear a lot about it too. It's impressive. I was looking at the chart that you have, which is sort of the first chart where you show the different subcommittees that are part of the Graduate Student Council. And I wonder a little bit about two things. I wondered about how do you actually recruit folks to fill those positions? How do you get those students to serve in those capacities? And how are you partnering with other advisory groups, for example, the Black Graduate Student Association? So could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so in terms of recruiting, a lot of it is because, the committee chairs also, I was a committee chair once, you also don't do that much. You again like supervise another team of people who are doing things. So the hope is that, and this works for a lot of the committees, that they have contributors who are already actively contributing, and then they just kind of like naturally move up. So that works out really well for most, if not all, the committees. Only every once in a while does that chain kind of break, and then we have to like find people kind of at random from the graduate student body. In terms of interactions with specific other groups, a lot of it is like within the committees, right? So like in terms of the Black Graduate Student Association union, wait, no. It is A, it is A for, yeah, I have to remember because undergrads is BSU. So they interact very much with our Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee. It was a subcommittee last year, it's now a committee this year, but there's very strong ties actually there. I think Arthur has been the primary person, I don't remember his last name, but a PhD student, Air Astro. But he's involved with BGSA and is one of the representatives for underrepresented minorities on our Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee. So we do have pretty strong ties. Of course, I think there's always more opportunities. Like DEI specifically is still like figuring itself out. It is a very young committee. and still trying to figure out what exactly he wants to do. So there's always more opportunities for interaction and collaboration.
Other questions? Hey, oh, that's good. Yeah.
Other than food,
Yes.
what gets graduate students to come out and engage in activities that are beyond their academic?
Yeah. So we've had, well, okay, it's really funny. So one of the big things, obviously, is if it's like a social event that's fun, people also go to, especially if it's subsidized. Helps a lot. And then in terms of all the other stuff, a lot of it's just like if it happens to match their interests, right? So like external affairs has run a lot of sort of panels and things tied to policy and politics, and the students that are interested in that will go to those. So there's like things like that, like Academic Research and Careers, ARC, does a lot of professional development related panels and networking events. And obviously, if students are like sort of in that mode, or like they want to go like move into that sort of field, they're interested in those types of events. So I think a lot of it ends up being very like interest driven. But in terms of like general stuff that helps all the time is like some sort of food or financial subsidy for something. It's generally always nice.
Well, we had Grad Appreciation Week, and there were a lot of different fun activities there, like planning, bamboo and things that just sold out really quickly. Goat yoga. I mean, there are a few people who did that here. So, yeah.
Yeah. So it's like food, fun, and as I said, it helps to have a little financial subsidy in there. If it's somebody who can like have fun for a little bit less than they would have to pay otherwise, like, doesn't hurt.
So many of these committees are organizing events, activity opportunities that maybe OVC offices are also doing similar kinds of things. So what's the best way to collaborate so we're not just duplicating efforts?
Yeah. So the easiest way to do it is if you run something specific and you just want to check to see if GSE does something similar, is just email the officers. So gsc@mit.edu goes to the officers, and that's fine. We can like make a quick note of like, oh, what committee would that be relevant to, and we'll just like forward it on to them. Or if we already know like, yes, they do it, or yes, we know they don't, we can connect you to the right people. That's like the easiest way. The harder way is to like figure out which committee. But like we can do that for you, so just feel free to email gsc@mit.edu.
And I mean, we meet every 2 weeks. They meet with Michael and other communicators. They're frequently meeting with Office of Grad Education. So I think it's a matter of just finding those opportunities to coordinate. So we both MIT administration and the GSC wishes that we could be sort of more effective in communicating, right? If you send something out, you'd like people to know about it. And so what we've done is we've collaborated on that. So if there's an event that we think is related to professional development, it doesn't matter whether it's Deborah's office that's running it, or the GSC that's running it, or the Gordon program that's running it, we will cross-advertise that. But we just have to be coordinated to do that. So if there's specific examples like that, I think if you either connect with Peter and that crew, or with me, or with Blanche, or with Michael, we can make sure that we get the coordination done. Other questions? All right, well, thank you all, and thank you to the GSC. As I said, they're a, yeah. The GSC is just a huge force for change on campus, and just about everything that we do that relates to improving things or changing things that relate to grad students, we end up partnering with someone or another in the GSC on. So just a credit to you guys for all that you're doing. Thanks. Yeah. And there is some food across the hall. And I'll wish everyone a happy and productive, and I hope at least still a little more restful summer.